in the frozen trenches of World War I, where bullets had spoken louder than words for months, something unimaginable happened. On Christmas Day, sworn enemies laid down their rifles, stepped into no man's land, and shared laughter, songs, cigarettes, and even a game of football. My name is Special Agent Anderson. This is the story of the 1914 Christmas Truce, when a few soldiers simply stopped fighting and enemies shook hands. They called it the war to end all wars, but by December 1914, it was already clear that this war, the Great War, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Western Front had become a graveyard that stretched across Europe, a frozen hell of barbed wire, artillery smoke, and rotting corpses. But on the night of December 24th, a miracle happened. Something pierced the silence. Not a bullet, not a command, but a song. It came from the German trenches. Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. Silent night. A voice. Trembling, uncertain, but unmistakably human. The British soldiers listened, stunned. Some laughed. Some lowered their rifles. One or two quietly joined in, humming along with the tune that crossed the battlefield like a prayer. Soon, the British began singing carols of their own. First, the First Noel, then, "O come, all ye faithful." Then came voices, shouts in broken English and broken German. "You no shoot, we no shoot. Merry Christmas, Tommy. Fröhliche Weihnachten, Fritz." What happened next would become one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of warfare. In some parts of the line, soldiers began to climb out of their trenches. Slowly, cautiously, hands in the air. They crossed no man's land, the space between the trenches littered with bodies and barbed wire. At first, they were afraid it was a trick, that the other side would open fire. But no one did. Instead, men met in the middle, and what followed defied every rule of war. They shook hands. They smiled. They exchanged cigarettes, chocolates, and bits of uniform. A British private handed a tin of biscuits to a German soldier, who returned the favor with a leather flask of schnapps. They showed each other photographs of their wives and children. No words were needed. A nod, a tear, a pat on the back said everything. They understood each other. In some sectors, a football appeared. And then, just like that, the match began. Germans versus British. One British soldier wrote in a letter that it was the most extraordinary thing he had ever seen. There were no uniforms, no ranks, just boys playing football in the middle of a war. Cigarettes were lit. A bottle of wine passed from German to Scot to Frenchman. Men who couldn't understand each other's language toasted anyway. It was cold. It was muddy. But it was Christmas. And for one night, the front lines of the deadliest war the world had known became a celebration of life. One British soldier brought out a harmonica, but it couldn't last. By the morning of December 26th, officers had begun ordering their men back to the trenches. In some places, the truce continued a day or two longer. In others, the shooting resumed almost immediately. But the men who had shaken hands, who had played football, who had shown each other pictures of their children and shared a cigarette over the body of a fallen comrade, they never forgot. Many of them would die in the months and years that followed, but those who lived carried that memory for the rest of their lives. The Christmas Truce of 1914 wasn't a grand act of rebellion. It was a moment when the world paused, when the voices of soldiers rose above the roar of guns and said, "Not today. Today we are not enemies." It was brief, but it mattered. It still matters. Because it reminds us that sometimes peace is not made by treaties or leaders, but by the quiet courage of ordinary people who look across a battlefield and see a brother instead of a target.